Good evening and welcome tonight to the March 14th, 2022 Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. We as a board believe it's in our best interest and the best interest of the students of the district to hear comments from district residents. An opportunity will be given later in this meeting for public comment, both in person and through the chat feature, which will then be read by Ms. Buckman. This meeting is being live streamed and video recorded with sound for public broadcast. All participants joining via Zoom will be muted upon entry. We're going to start this evening's meeting with several presentations around the K-4 final schedule update, the special education compliance monitoring, and information about the elementary and secondary school emergency relief ESSER grant update. I'm hand it over to Dr. Mameen.
Thank you so much, President Klein. Good evening, everyone. As President Klein just mentioned, that we have several presentations this evening. And this evening we will welcome to the microphone Dr. Gaudioso, Ms. Frazier, and Dr. McGloin as we go through these presentations. With the blessing of the board and President Klein, I would like to insert a quick some information in regards to our efforts with mitigating COVID-19 in our schools and masking, which a few weeks ago we have moved to masking optional in our classes, and there has been updated CDC guidance. Some that refers to transportation, and transportation falls under our health and safety plan, and I believe that it would be valuable to present an update on where we are in regards to masking in schools and perhaps transportation. Thank you. Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I'll try to be brief. A few weeks ago, as the community is well aware, we issued a letter to families explaining that we have adopted the newest CDC guidance as it relates to mitigation measures and their impact on schools. Namely, probably at the forefront of that was a discussion about masks and moving towards that mask optional status for our schools' facilities, specifically in school buildings and outdoors. We have been monitoring that over the last couple of weeks, and much like local transmission rates, we're seeing that we are headed in the right direction in terms of those numbers. We are currently, as a community, in the low transmission level, according to the new CDC guidance, and for the most part, our internal numbers have also fallen quite dramatically since the numbers we saw in January and early February. So in front of us today is the question about school transportation. As we've remarked, and I think some community commenters and also publicly, I think in the board meeting, is to explain that our health and safety plan had a specific carve out for transportation, and that originated based on the federal guidance that was put forth over a year ago that required masking on public transit, and that was and that included school transportation as well. Now that the CDC has clarified that with its new guidance, it no longer is recommending or requiring masking on school transportation. It is the recommendation of the administration that we move in that direction of alignment with the CDC on that, on school transportation as well. So the health and safety, members of the health and safety team have been consulted on this, and it is the recommendation of that team as well as the administration to move in the direction of mask optional on school transportation as well. Any questions?
Any questions? And also per that recommendation, we will allow time for parents and guardians to be able to work with their youngsters at home to be able to, similar to when we went mask optional in classes, so that families can have those discussions with children ahead of time before we move into any type of full implementation of masking optional on buses. Thank you. All right. President Klein and members of the school board, we'll move into our K-12 final schedule update with Dr. Gaudioso. Sean Bertanowicz. Oh, K-4. I'm sorry. I said K-12. My apologies. K-4 update with Dr. Gaudioso, Mr. Bertanowicz, and Dr. Albanese. Thank you.
Thank you.
I said K.
So, good evening. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be here. I'm Jen Gaudioso, Director of Elementary Education. With me tonight, Dr. Toby Albanese, Principal at Marion Elementary, and Mr. Sean Bertanowicz, Principal of Penwyn Elementary. And while we're representing the work of the K-4 team, it's been a big endeavor over about 2 years now. We have over 52 teachers in various roles, administrators, and the schedule update we're about to share has been a collaboration across all 6 elementary schools, principals, and feedback sessions with teachers. So I'm just going to, before we start and provide the schedule update, I'm just going to reorient you to the work of the committee. And the most important and most exciting part of the work is that it aligns to the strategic plan and it positions us to advance the plan over the next several years. A lot of the goals of the strategic plan we see as embedded in the recommendations of the committee, which is very exciting. And while we were developing our recommendations, our committee worked to develop a unique vision and mission for K-4 education. And the idea there is that while we're all as a district aligned with All Forward and the aspirations of the strategic plan, there are traits, characters of K-4 education that are unique and really worthy of a deep dive into what is the ideal optimal experience for our students that we want to create. So the vision anchored in the strategic plan and the mission, as you can see here, some of the key highlights are bolded in blue and red. This idea that we want students to be in these communities and developing their voice, their independence, and really developing critical thinking and innovation and real-world problem solving. And to that end, our mission is to design the authentic learning experiences that will foster that and really lead to these dispositions that students, when they're 4th graders and leaving us to go to middle school with the new configuration, they're really walking away with a really rich repertoire of skills and beliefs about themselves and the world around them and their part in it. So it's been really exciting work. When we think about cohesive learning communities and critical thinking and changing world and real-world experiences, some of what you'll hear in the recommendations include interdisciplinary opportunities, problem-based learning, and those are elements that put students at the center in an inquiry process. So just to contextualize the schedule and remind you of some of our goals. So in terms of the schedule, and where this part of our work fits in the overall, we spent about 1.5 years reimagining and really looking at possibility and what could our K-4 program look like after realignment. Moving into the schedule phase really is where we start to look at what is possible and what are the things that we can accomplish that get us closest to our ideals and goals. So at this point, we look at the realities of staffing and budget, the impact or place constraints that we work to be innovative and really try to maximize possibility and achieve the goals of our team. So these committee recommendations you've seen before. And, you know, the subgroups are here, some of their recommendations are here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bertanowicz, who's going to talk about the scheduling implications of each of those subgroup goals.
Good evening. So the scheduling committee had the task of taking what was essentially the wish list of each of the subcommittees. We said the sky's the limit. You have complete ownership over what we can possibly do. So if it was being done simply from your lens, tell us exactly what you would want to see in this schedule. What we did is we compiled all those wishes from all those different stakeholders and brought them together. And then we tried to identify on those lists, Are there ones that we notice were coming across in different subgroups so that if we were to get that one particular item into the schedule, it would meet the needs of multiple groups? So what we ended up with is, and on this slide here, you'll see the areas that are highlighted and bolded in blue for you show the accomplishments from the wish list. So the things that people had asked us for, the different groups that we were getting feedback from, that we were able to accommodate in the schedule that is being proposed, were things that are seen across multiple of the committees, the subcommittees as well. The large flexible blocks, the establishment of kind of breaking down the walls between the different content areas in order to make sure that kids are learning things in a problem-based learning process where they see the connections between the different content areas. Some of the things that we've accomplished with the proposed schedule that were not there before was ensuring a time for professional learning communities for all teachers, special area teachers along with the regular classroom teachers as well. That was something that had escaped us that we weren't able to accomplish up until this point. In addition to those first subcommittees that were at work, we identified 2 additional committees that we wanted to solicit feedback from, and therefore a special area and a culture and community subcommittee was again created in order to solicit feedback from their lens as well. Some of the things that we hope to accomplish, and we did accomplish with this schedule, is the trans or interdisciplinary opportunities. So bringing special area teachers into work with content area teachers to say, in my particular area, how could I support what you're trying to achieve in your content areas as well? These are exciting things that we're looking forward to see come to life as we begin the process of implementing the schedule that we've proposed. We had the opportunity to work with a consultant, Dr. Reddick, and Dr. Reddick is fond of saying you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything. So after we've collected all of these the feedback from all these committees, then we had to look at our challenges. And what are our challenges in terms of a schedule? Well, obviously, everybody has priorities that they want to be at the top of the list. We have a set number of minutes in the school day to work with. So now how do we start to carve out those minutes in order to achieve as many of the goals as we wanted to achieve? We were tasked with doing this within the staffing allocations that we currently had. So that was another constraint that we had as we went through this process. One of the things that we were very clear on is that we were going to have a schedule to start the next school year. I talk about Lisa Eisenberg, who's one of my STEM teachers. She loves STEM. So she tells her kids, here's a STEM challenge. And the minute they figure it out, she tells them, now make it better. That's how we're going at the schedule. We know that we have a schedule to start with. We know that as we go through the process of living with the schedule, we're going to have opportunities to learn and grow. And our goal is to continue to make this better as we move forward. What you have in front of you is a breakdown of the instructional minutes available and how we allocated them. Some of the things that I'll point out for you is that part of the recommendation that we had was we needed to increase the instructional minutes in the primary grades for English language arts. So you'll see a difference there between 1st and 2nd grade and 3rd and 4th grade, with more time being dedicated to English language arts in those grades. We also were able to implement a 45-minute special area schedule in which library was increased from 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and we also added STEM as a special in place of FLES. So those were exciting things that we were hoping to accomplish. We've also increased win time, which is what I need time, which Dr. Albanese will talk a little bit more about later. And we were also able to increase the alignment in the program recommendation minutes for our mathematics program as well. The kindergarten schedule is something that is still under discussion as we move forward with the special areas scheduled for next year. The next 3 slides are essentially the same information, just from different vantage points. This particular slide shows you what an entire school schedule might look like. We are working on a schedule shell. We're very clear that each school will take the shell and have to customize it to meet their needs in each of the 6 individual schools. Each school schedule may end up looking slightly different, but what this does is give you the overall schedule for the entire school. This particular view is for the grade levels, so it shows you how, in the course of a day, the instructional minutes are allocated and how it could be laid out across the course of a regular school day. The final slide here shows you how our win time would be incorporated into it, along with the special area or on-course subjects as well. A couple things that we accomplished here that we wanted to highlight was a dedicated time for morning meeting to ensure that everyone was having that opportunity built into their day to have that social and emotional and community building. Part of the way that we've structured the schedule to give the special area teachers an opportunity to join morning meetings to become part of classroom communities across the school. We've also built in what we're calling a special area flex. This will be an opportunity for special area teachers to collaborate amongst themselves in a building, to collaborate with their peers across the school district, and also to give opportunities for grade level teams to meet when needed. The other, we have built in 30 minutes of specials for our kindergarten specials across 2 different days at this point. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Albanese to talk about what I need.
Good evening, everyone. So we thought that one of the major wins or takeaways, gains, if you will, from what I need would be increasing the time allocation for it. There's a lot that typically has lived within this, what was a 30-minute period. By expanding it to 60 minutes, 2 separate blocks, we've been able to increase the differentiation for all students. We've been able to make sure that every kid truly does get what they need without having to be pulled out or missing that all valuable core instruction from their homeroom teachers. We've expanded surface area for special educators, service providers to be able to reach kids again while not tapping into that precious time when they're with their general education peers in a general education environment. And we've per the recommendations for these kinds of periods, we've been able to make sure that all students have access to an expanded core program of English language arts and math, and it's dependent on truly what those students need, hence the name, What I Need for that time period. This is a new slide that you guys didn't necessarily see back in January when we all first presented. This is the gains and the wins from across 3 different lenses: students, teachers, and then of course the strategic plan all forward, and ways in which you could see there detailed that we feel this schedule provided wins for students, teachers, and of course the guiding document, our strategic plan. I'll just take a moment there to review that. We as elementary principals started having conversations with our staff back in the first part of December about what this shell of a schedule could look like, how we had taken the 385 minutes and parsed it throughout the day to make sure that we were meeting all the recommendations, all of the best practices that we possibly could, and of course, taking into consideration all those subcommittees that had their healthy wish lists. So we started in December, and here we are in March. From that time forward, we've had 10 or more formal opportunities to receive feedback, such as scheduled meetings, opportunities to meet with different stakeholders, different groups. Outside of the 10 that we've had, we continue to receive informal feedback all the time, and something that Mr. Bernatowicz touched on. This spring, we're looking forward to continuing to work with teachers to fine-tune certain elements of the schedule to make sure that it's the best it can be for fall 22, but fully expecting that throughout 22, 23, 23, 24, we'll continue to receive feedback from those who are living and experiencing our new framework for a schedule. These were some of the themes that we pulled from all of those different sessions. The double win was seen certainly as a win. The STEM special was something that folks were very excited about. Common planning time, which was something that previously was not realized across all 6 of our elementary schools. With this framework, we were able to do that. And of course, you'll hear a lot about PBL, project-based learning, and that's a different way for students to experience their curricula, and it mirrors more like what the real world looks and feels like, and not necessarily in separate silos. In order to pull all that off, you need opportunities to bring professionals together, common planning time, to make sure that those opportunities are meaningful for students. So we look forward to growing into our PBL models. Some of the concerns that we had heard and picked up on was in order to create an an opportunity for teachers to come together at the same time within the same building, whether it's, say, third grade, for example, all third grade teachers, opportunity to come together for their common planning time, and perhaps even with third grade teachers from across the district, we needed to do some things differently. So you'll see some of the things that we wrestled with early on in the feedback sessions, and we think we've been able to come full circle and address some of those initial concerns. This details one of those concerns. So in order to have common planning time, you need to create a situation where all students in a grade level have specials at the same time. And that's, you know, while they're all attending and working with one adult, that, or a group or team of adults, that allows, let's say, the grade level teachers to come together to plan those meaningful project-based learning activities. So in order to make that happen, we needed to create an opportunity to either share staff, which we were able to do. We have specials area staff, and some of our smaller schools will be available to go and support the larger schools to make sure that all students in grade levels in those larger schools can have specials at the same time, thus freeing up the grade level teachers to come together to plan meaningful extensions and project-based activities. When we first presented this, you'll recognize, you might remember that top graphic, the top grid. What we first did when looking at this was we wanted to come up with the worst case scenario, the class sizes if they were all at max, and what it would look like if we needed to create a situation where students in a grade level would need to perhaps come out of their homeroom and join others in specials to make sure that we could create that common planning time. So when we first looked at this, we looked at the class size guidelines and came up with the worst case scenario. Since that time and receiving some feedback, we looked at what actually is our projected enrollment across particularly our larger schools. So you'll see there that the realized impact on specials class sizes is really not that significant. And we're able to use staff again from the smaller schools to pick up some of those pieces. And another thing that we heard from feedback, particularly from parent groups, is that they actually like the idea of students coming out of their homeroom, where they primarily at the elementary level, they live in that homeroom almost all day long. So with this model, we have an opportunity for students to come out of their homeroom groups and to mingle and interact with their peers from across the grade level, much like what happens at the secondary level when kids come off of team perhaps for specials and electives. So again, things that we thought maybe would be somewhat problematic, we've learned through feedback sessions with some realistic look at actual numbers and tweaking some things along the way. They're now seen as gains and wins for our students. Dr. Gaudioso?
Thank you. And one of the things that was highlighted was, I think, our original proposal, we were suggesting taking one homeroom and dividing the students into the special areas. And instead, I just want to highlight the one slide that Dr. Albany showed. Our proposal is that the students would be regrouped for specials, and that way students have a more uniform experience. And that came out of the feedback sessions, as Dr. Albanese was saying. So we're very excited about all of the gains and the things that have been achieved. I know in terms of next steps, one of the things that's really critical in any year is teacher involvement and input during the scheduling process. So every spring, principals begin creating the schedule based on the current enrollment, the current needs of students, the current number of sections, and that answers the question, why can't all buildings use exactly the same schedule? And it really is, enrollment is different, staff to support different grade levels or student needs may be different, sections may be different, and when you look at possible staff sharing, especially when we look at special areas, we're going to have some different schedules running, but the instructional minutes will guide the planning. So that will be in common. So when principals are faced with that each spring, they are collaborating, they'll build and they'll collaborate with teachers and teams and have conversation. So all of that will continue to occur, probably more so with the new schedule model. and continue to collect teacher input. One of the things that came up in one of the sessions was, and it was a great idea, we've talked about, building long-term implementation plans for this work, which is 3 to 5 years. One of the things that the teachers talked through was, having some checkpoints next year where we're collecting feedback, how's it going, and continuing to refine. So that's something that we'll look to conduct through the next school year and beyond. I think, as both of our principals were saying, getting better is the plan, as we grow into the practices with the interdisciplinary learning, as well as just how we can work best with the schedule. One thing you'll have noticed is the K was a grayed out column. The idea there is we have a lot going on in kindergarten with looking ahead at spaces. I know the question has come up repeatedly, what about full day K? And I would say that's not a decision that our team can make. Certainly there's wondering and questions about it, but there are a lot of questions on the table, and some changes we could make programmatically might be premature because we may be more thoughtful down the road if we have more information about the district direction. That's one piece of it. Another is that when we look at our program articulation in kindergarten, we're using an Older Journeys program, and teachers are supplementing and very interdisciplinary in kindergarten, as you can imagine. So some articulation work before we scale down their program, their core program, and really making sure that if we have special areas who are going to, for example, support standards for kindergarten, we really need a lot of alignment work, and we need some professional development, and that's not something that we're ready to start September 2022. So kindergarten we look at as more of a longer term project where we're just trying to design thoughtfully for our youngest learners. So no recommendations for change for next year, with the exception of interdisciplinary learning opportunities, looking at inquiry-based learning, discovery experiences, and those things that meet the goals of the program recommendations, but not necessarily schedule changes for next year. We'll continue to research models, additional site visits, looking at what can these problem-based learning expeditions look like. We're going to start small so that we can really be successful and let them grow. We have a team working on prototypes right now, and what does it mean to break down walls, keep our core programs so that we're using our research-based resources, but starting to be interdisciplinary, and then just continuing to look at other ways that we can individualize for student through WIN, through MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, and then things like even talent development. So we have a lot of exciting work ahead, and it really, really has been wonderful work and engaging, and a really large group of dedicated educators who've been a part of it. So I just want to thank them on on behalf of us that they put so much into this. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gaudioso, Dr. Albanese, Mr. Bernadowitz. It's nice to see, or I very much appreciate sort of the iterative process and the ongoing refining. This has been presented multiple times throughout the school year, and it's it's clear sort of the thoughtfulness that goes into it, and you're taking the feedback and saying, okay, how best can we integrate that? The one thing I wanted to thank you for updating us on was the specials and the class sizes around special. I know that there was concern around that. And so it's nice to see that while there might be 1 or 2 increases, that it's not an increase of overall class size, it's just for the specials, and it's actually quite a bit smaller than originally anticipated. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna open up to see if anyone on the board has questions. Shana? Ms. Kalish?
Thank you, President Klein. I have no questions, only brief comments. I will reiterate what President Klein said, that I really appreciate that you and the team have opened yourself up to feedback and really taken it to heart and thought about creative solutions. And I think that the way the specials have been sort of rejiggered is really great. As the parent of an elementary school kid, I know it's great when they get an opportunity to interact with their peers in other classes. to that end, my kid is a second grader and is over the moon at the STEM elective. So you have won a fan in her. And I apologize for my ongoing questions about full day K. You know, it's my hobby horse, so I am looking forward to seeing what the kindergarten schedule looks like coming forward. I appreciate that you really have put some thought into it, and that they're going to get some specials put in there, and so that they're getting the full experience, even in an abbreviated timeline. So that's what I got.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kalish. Ms. Schrack?
Hi there, thanks so much. Echo everyone's sentiments, just a few questions or noticings. One, in terms of next steps, when we talk about still defining the model for win time or the MTSS delivery models, and also staying within this current staffing confines, just wondering if you're seeing any constraints, potential constraints there, also connected to the how administrators are moving within the elementary, and certain elementary schools have less administrators in the past than to oversee win time and some of these other programmatic things that you're putting into place.
Okay. That's a great question. So one of another concurrent pathway we're working on is our MTSS work. And we're working with a consultant, and principals really have a large leadership role in that. We have an IST, instructional support team teacher in each of the buildings and in elementary. And one of the things that we look at with their role is helping to coordinate to some degree and be data forward and support the teams and the PLCs. And a lot of the work with MTSS and during that win time, the idea with the no-pull block is that in the core program with the classroom teacher, that is an opportunity for the classroom teacher to use their classroom data and give that just in time to support to students as they need it and as those needs emerge. So the idea there is to preserve what in MTSS would be called tier 1 or core classroom support, so that when win time comes, anybody who's getting, for example, like speech or any additional services, the classroom teacher has access to, rather than having to pull students during core. So it really is increasing the number of tier 1 or regular classroom intervention minutes for students, for all students, and that can include extension and enrichment as well. And then during that time when pulls can happen, can be the more tailored opportunities. In terms of staffing, the staff that we currently are using would still support that work. We would have actually, when we consider the gains in tier 1 or classroom teacher access to students with the double block, we're actually increasing staff available to do some of that differentiation, if you think of it that way. One of the things that we have been looking at is we have a configuration right now with our reading specialists. They serve students in a K2/3-5 format. We're looking at they would all be K4, and in this way you have more hands on deck during each of those intervention blocks. And when we worked with the consultant, those intervention blocks were staggered through the day so that all those hands on deck are available for each grade level's win time. So at this time, we're really, we're just going to be working with, when we say we're going to look at possible delivery models, some of what we're looking at really are looking at tiers of students and levels of need and how best to meet them. We got some great ideas when we did one teacher parent group, even just about, if you've got 2 fourth grade teachers, if they both don't have the no pull time at the same time, you have more people available or more differentiated groups. So that's where some of that refinement, we're really finding some innovative ideas coming out. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a start, thanks. And secondarily, this is more noticing connected to the added slide 12 with the schedule gains. We know that the vision of your building is in your master roster. Just a noticing or a request is to consider some of the language we use in this around equity. It seems to be very much framed in special education, but there are many other facets of equity. And I do have concerns in the mission statement in cultivating positive dispositions, that language in particular, and then how we're talking about culture, community, and the feedback provided to teachers, knowing the intricate professional development that's really needed to mitigate against bias that we're seeing in our schools. And so would just request we look at some of that language connected to those concepts.
Okay, I appreciate
and consider updating.
Yeah. And positive dispositions, one of the things that we're thinking of when we say that is the habits of mind. And we could be more explicit and probably
Yeah, I
use
get
that
that.
term.
I just think
but-
when we think of what we're trying to impart on students versus what we're trying to cultivate, there's a like pretty nuanced difference in the use of that word, especially across lines of race and class and difference.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Sautner?
Thanks. Okay, two questions. How are you going to measure? So like, I assume grades would be great if they go up after this schedule is implemented, but what are the other kind of measurement buckets that you're gonna use to kind of analyze this? Is it working? So my two questions are about, is it working and how you're gonna get feedback on that? But first, how you're gonna measure it?
So it
Yeah.
is a big term, because when we think about what it is, it could be the success of our win time block, right? So we might be looking at data related to success of our interventions, both number of students in the program, making adequate growth, looking at rates of improvement. It could be in our core block, looking at how effective are our tier 1 interventions, are teachers having access to students, are they seeing gains from what they're able to do with students? And it could also be just overall schedule. Are we finding, with, feedback and allocations, are we seeing that we can, for example, meet the recommendations of the different programs in terms of recommended minutes? So I think there are a lot of buckets of measurement that we're going to have to be engaged in. And some of it we're going to be working through with our MTSS team and our consultant, just as we look at, in year 1, we're building infrastructure for data that includes Illuminate and looking at, how are we measuring our success with interventions. So some of that is going to be on that other pathway where we're going to have some data buckets that occur naturally because of that other work. And then some of it is going to have to evolve with our team, the K-4 team, looking at, those checkpoints during the year next year, and, how are we going to collect feedback and take, again, continued feedback for refinement.
Yeah, and I think I asked you a question the last time you presented this with those checkpoints. It's nice to know what we're measuring, and then at those checkpoints saying this is where we are against that measurement. And then also you included parents in the community so much. Do you have, because you talked earlier about having those polls that you're going to meet with the teachers to get their feedback. Are you thinking about leveling in that community feedback as you go to?
So what we did this past time was we had parents involved last year who didn't participate this year in the committee, just schedules changed, that sort of thing. We invited them back to the feedback sessions. Didn't have a ton of takers, but we would use that same model, inviting back the people closest to the work. But I think we would also grow and look at, who else can we bring to the table for some feedback. And I think principals each have their networks of parent communication with the HSAs and so forth. So really getting some feedback there.
Great.
And I think some of it's going to be qualitative, because I think when we look at, for example, the success of, the regrouping of specials, some of that is going to be, at the student experience level. So.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Sautner. Ms. Schaffmeister?
Actually, Curry actually made me think of one other question now. When you're talking about like how it's been aligned and how and all the assessments you make, we have that K-5 report card was redesigned. Will that meet the needs of this new type of program, or is there going to have to be some kind of fiddle around with it, for lack of a better way to say?
That's a good question. The report card is aligned to the standards. So the standards we're going to stay aligned to. And even when we talk about interdisciplinary learning and problem-based learning, we are still using our core math program, for example, our core, literacy resources. So, those will stay in place, and so will the standards and the skills toward which students are working. We may just be changing the approach, but they're still going to have to learn those grade level standards and skills. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, we have Mrs. Kimberly Frazier approaching the microphone for our special education compliance monitoring report. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for allowing us to present this evening. It's my honor to be here representing the Special Education Department. And I have several team members with us that I just want to share. I'll be presenting this evening on our behalf, but this work couldn't be accomplished without the special education supervisors and their leadership and their skill. And so, Dr. Stephanie Doyle, Beth Cavalier, Gwen Nardowitz, and Melissa Snoppy-Gibson are all with us this evening as well. So I appreciate their participation here this evening. So this The special education compliance monitoring is driven by the Bureau of Special Education, monitors all school districts and charter schools at least once over a 6-year cycle. So the last time that we were monitored was in the 2015-16 school year. And really what the Bureau is looking at is that we're complying with federal and state special education regulations, and not just that compliance piece, but that we're also improving the performance outcomes of our students with disabilities. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. And what happens is it's a really extensive process that started back earlier this school year that required us to put a lot of information together for the state to review, and then a trained monitoring teams apply criteria that's provided within the regulations. And you can see here which regulations they focus on. What's important is like these regulations represent really important protections for our students with disabilities. And as our team approaches this process each time, we look at it as an opportunity to see where can we get better, where can we improve. Behind every decision that we make, behind every piece that I share with you here this evening, we never lose sight of the fact that there's students on the other end of that. And we care very much about our students, we care about our families, and we look at this as an opportunity to dig deeply into the work that we're doing within the special education department and to see where we can improve. Again, the process is quite extensive. These are all of the different components that make up the process. And to get a sense of the depth of that, we started again back late summer, early fall in the process, and I'm just now here presenting to you. So we've been working through this with the state throughout this period of time. I'm going to go through real quickly each one of these to give you a little bit of a background in terms of what we look at for this. And you'll see throughout the presentation that it's really a deep look into the district's data, district policies, district practices, district procedures. The first component of the process is to do a facilitated self-assessment. So this is a comprehensive report that we compile to provide the Bureau of Special Education with information in all of these different areas. And you can see that it's really quite a wide range of things that they look at, everything from facilities to least restrictive to actual performance data. So within each of these, in addition to the facilitated self-assessment, when the trained monitoring teams come out on site, there's also a review of student files throughout the process, and 12 of the 21 sections require a random file review. And so students are randomly pulled, generally around 10 for each of the 12 sections that are looked at a little bit more closely, and they look really closely at those individual student files in addition to district practices and policies. Another part of that initial process is to do an educational benefit review, and this is really like a systematic approach to looking at students, identified students over a 3-year period of time, and bringing together current case manager, supervisors, coordinators, and really looking at 3 years worth of IEPs, 3 years worth of data, evaluation reports, and through that, the goal is really to determine whether or not the student's current individual program is calculated for student benefit, so educational benefit review. The 10 students are randomly selected by the Bureau of Special Education. It represents a sample across grade levels, disability, and support type, and includes also always at least one student who's placed in an out-of-district placement. And along with that, as part of the educational benefit review, is the work that the team does in advance. And then the trained monitoring team will interview those parents and guardians, interview a general education and special education teacher related to those students. So it's a quite extensive process, again, looking at 10 randomly selected students. There is an on-site portion to this. It used to actually be all on-site, and then I think this is a positive of COVID, that Portions of it now are also done virtually, which really made it much more efficient. But there were several days that the trained monitoring team was on site where they were doing actual file reviews, interviewing staff, reviewing all of our policies, doing the comprehensive case studies. They did classroom observations, interviews of staff. And the Bureau's advisors pulled together then a follow-up consultation. We look at several different areas that I'm going to talk a little bit about as we go through this. Individual corrective action plans, least restrictive environment, and professional development. And this is what came through with our follow-up with the state. As a comparison to 2015, we have once again maintained strong compliance documented through the comprehensive file reviews. So we're looking at less than a 1% non-compliance. So to give you a sense of that, there were actually 1,860 checkpoints that the state was looking at, and there were only 12 indications of out of compliance. I think that that number would be remarkable in any typical year, that it is coming out of 2 years of dealing with the pandemic, after 2 years of really needing to rethink process and procedures. We are a very document-heavy department and process-heavy department, and so really needing to be able to rethink our process and procedures, and that the teams were able to really maintain that strong compliance is really impressive. Some of the examples of things that we saw, to give you a sense, within an IEP document, there is a place for parental concerns. If a parent does not indicates that they don't have any concerns, the team needs to write no concerns at this time. 2 of the 12 was marked because the case manager simply left it blank as opposed to filling out no concerns at this time. So that's an example of some of the things that they looked at. In terms of the corrective action area in 2015, the only area for corrective action was least restrictive environment, specifically as it related to our students that were placed in out-of-district placements. And this is an area that we not only improved, but we have exceeded what the state's expectations are. And so I put together this chart so you can see the different levels of support, itinerant being the most inclusive to out-of-district placements, and the state average, and then lower variance. And so they use that state number as what the target is for districts, and you can see that we've exceeded the expectations in all areas. And particularly, I'll draw your attention to the out-of-district placement number, because that's the area that we were flagged for corrective action back in 2015, and we have continued to maintain solid numbers with that. That 2.7% is 2.7% of special education students, so it actually represents less than 1% of all of our students in the district require programming outside of the district. I think it's important to mention that we have developed programming. We've worked really hard on supporting students in their home schools and developing programming to that end. But there will be times when students' needs exceed what we can provide. And while we monitor these numbers and we really look closely at them, the reality is that if students' needs exceeded what we provided and they needed an out-of-district placement, we would provide that based on what the student needed, even if it meant throwing our numbers higher. What's most important is making sure that we support our students. To give you a sense of the progress we've made in terms of out-of-district placements, I don't think it's enough to look at the percentage. I think it's looking at relative to the number of students who are receiving special education services. This is simply a 10-year look back. And so you can see over 10 years, first, how the special education population has grown over the last 10 years, and how we've steadily brought down that number of students requiring out-of-district placements. And again, that is supported by program development that we've done over the past few years. In our follow-up, we also talked about professional development. So one of the, as I mentioned before, one of the parts of the process is a parent, a staff, and a student survey, student at the secondary level. For the staffs, and those surveys are driven by the Bureau of Special Education. So we don't get to decide what's on there. The Bureau says this is what, every district is asked to fill out. And so gauging questions from a staff perspective: how comfortable do you feel delivering instruction to students with disabilities? What do you feel like you need more support with? And 13.45% of our staff members participated. That represents less than 100 staff members, general education and special education. And so through this, themes definitely emerged in terms of what staff feel would be beneficial. Behavioral supports, topics related to inclusion, and more information related specifically to specific disability types and what needs might be related to those disabilities. So we look at this as we're moving forward. We're required to create a plan for professional development. These are some of the themes that we'll be addressing. This does tie nicely. You'll be hearing us present in the upcoming months on the special education plan. Professional development is a large part of that plan, and so we'll be able to tie that nicely within. And we've already started really as a team thinking about how can we address these. I'll be honest, these weren't a surprise to us in terms of what teachers were expressing they needed. The last professional development that we had for elementary students, we provided through our board-certified behavior analysts and our special education administrative team, provided training to all K-4 staff on positive behavioral supports. So it's an example of something we've already started to do. Looking at some of our inclusion topics, at our 5 to 8, the development of some of the courses, Dr. Leslie Pratt and Gwen Nardowitz are working collaboratively on that curriculum development and really thinking through that leadership course in particular. So we've already started making steps towards that. As we think forward to what our next steps are, thinking about reflecting on the feedback that was provided through the interviews, of course, following up on those minor individual corrective action items. Those individual corrective actions are due by December of 2022. So working with IEP teams on those minor corrections, developing, submitting the plan for professional development, and again, tying that to the special education plan, and really thinking how we connect all of this with our special education plan development and the work through the special education program evaluation. And specifically, just to highlight, we had done a presentation earlier this school year on the special education program evaluation. We definitely see ties coming through in all of these processes that we're going through. So the key recommendations that came through that, if you recall, was to empower IEP teams to resolve conflict at the team level, talked about less meetings, revisiting the achievement team, looking at guidelines, looking at practices to ensure consistency, really thinking about best practices for addressing needs of all students, and then within the existing strategic plan, establish a clear vision for inclusion. And so some of those connections we definitely see through the work with the compliance monitoring piece as well. So it was a nice tie. That K-12 multi-tiered systems of support that Dr. Gaudioso already spoke about, our professional learning to ensure and enhance meaningful inclusion, and working through the special education plan and the upcoming strategic plan work to have a clear vision for meaningful inclusion. So these are ways that already it's tied in things that we've presented and talked about. Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Frazier. Ms. Garrison?
Thank you. Wait a second. Hello? Good. Okay. I was curious, Dr. Frazier?
No, Ms. Frazier.
Ms. Frazier.
Yeah, thank you.
What percentage of our student population is receiving special education services?
It has increased slightly. We historically have been around 16%. We currently are at 18%.
18%.
Which is high. It's the highest that we've seen. I don't know the comparison to the state. I suspect that the state percentages are also increased. It's what I've heard from other districts, and I believe that there's probably some relation to pandemic affecting that as well.
And when we say special education, is gifted also under this?
No, for the purposes of this, this is your students with disabilities only.
Okay.
Gifted support students are separate unless they're dually identified. So if
Okay.
they're dual exceptionality, they would be included within these numbers.
Okay.
Separate from special education, we currently have around 1,558 students, 1,558 students receiving special education services. We have over 1,300 students receiving gifted support students.
1,300 receiving gifted. Now, is, under these buckets, there's the 504 also, is that both, or that's a separate thing?
Separate.
And how many, what percentage of our population receives the 504s?
So there is, the percent off the top of my head, I don't.
A guesstimate.
Don't know, but probably around 15% as well.
15%.
Yeah.
Is that considered normal or is that high?
It is high, it depends on who you compare us to, right?
Okay.
Like if you look nationally, there are states nationally that are significantly lower than that. If you look locally, we're probably around average to what other districts have.
Other suburban districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And if you look, it's a good point to mention, you know, when you think about our student population, around 40 to 42% of students have some type of specialized plan, whether that's an IEP, a GIEP, a 504. So that's a really high percent of our student body that requires some type of specialized supports.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Sutner?
Thank you. It's fun hearing this more than once because you can see the addition. So you've calmed all my questions down to just one.
I'm glad you think it's fun. That's great.
I was just grateful. So the question I have for, I'm going to the PAAC conference next Saturday after our retreat. What I'm wondering is how can we bring parents and the special ed community together, and are there outside groups? Because there's so many wonderful outside groups that do trainings, and it is wonderful to be able to have that time outside the IEP meeting, to have conversations, to learn together, or to also think about how these trainings can support teachers who want to get extra information and possibly like continuing ed credits or, you know, Act 48, whatever it is. Is there something that you, I mean, the public is listening to, that you would want to see from these outside organizations?
No, I think it's always great to partner with outside organizations, and it's something that our team talks about. And I mentioned at the curriculum committee of the board, I'm deeply appreciative of the work that we do with the Committee for Special Education. They've been great partners in this work, and they support with bringing in some of those learning opportunities as well as with the ISC.
Great. So continue that.
Absolutely, and I think the importance of that is it's not just the special education department, right? The work that we do to support our students with the disabilities is about every single team member.
Yep, and our mantra is every teacher should be a special education teacher. Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a couple of quick questions. One, with the student files that are randomly selected, and then there's the parent and staff interviews, those are tied to the randomly selected, right? So that it's not like parents are specifically picked, they interview the parents and the staff of the students whose files were randomly selected.
For the 10 of
For
the
the 10,
educational
right.
benefit
Okay.
review, but remember there's also, so those 10 for the educational benefit review are the more comprehensive classroom observation, interviews, a deep look at progress over the 3 IEPs. But within the facilitated self-assessment, there's also those 12 sections that there's additional random file reviews. Those are just file reviews, so
Okay.
no parents are contacted, teachers aren't contacted. It's based off of the paperwork that they review.
Got it, thank you. And I look forward to sort of the ongoing conversation and work around taking this information and then also the information from the program evaluation and seeing where sort of they dovetail and where the opportunity is really to move forward. So, and a little bit of a follow-up to Ms. Garrison's question. So the special education, this is on a 6-year cycle.
Yes.
But I remember also that there was a gifted education review also. Are they sort of on opposite cycles?
So gifted education is handled differently. Gifted education for any monitoring is actually a random poll every year. So the Department of Ed selects, I believe it's 10 different districts across the state, and it's a random poll. For the special education, because of the federal and state regulations that are associated with it, it is every 6 years you will be monitored at this depth.
Right. And how, so I know that the program evaluation that we had an outside person come in and help with, that started pre-pandemic, and then, as with many, many things, sort of came to a standstill for a while. How common is it for districts to do that, to sort of get a deeper or a slightly different evaluation of the programming rather than what the state is doing here?
I haven't heard of many other districts doing that, to be honest. I believe at least one other local district did, kind of as a follow-up to what the work that we did, but it is not common.
Right. Great.
To
Okay,
have a
thank you.
third party come in.
It feels to me as if the program evaluation was much richer, a little bit more qualitative, like there was more, this is sort of, feels a little bit more that the state was looking at numbers, right? Like they were making sure that we were doing the right things, but it was a little bit more, did we meet certain criteria, as opposed to the program evaluation that was a little bit more qualitative, deeper, broader.
And and remember, the program evaluation was largely focused on focus groups and information we gained through those focus groups. And so I think you just articulated it really well. It's a nice balance between the two of them to bring the two together.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. Are there other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fraser.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have Dr. McGloin for the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Grant Update, which is commonly known as ESSERS.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. I just wanted to thank everyone else that came and were here tonight, just in case we needed you. I appreciate the time that takes from your day. Thank you.
I'm like, they're leaving on me? I don't know how I feel about that, I have to be honest with you. So the state has two different funds that I wanted to update you on today that we received this year, which are ESSER 2, and then the ARP, which is the American Recovery Plan ESSER funds. If you remember, last year we received a grant for ESSER as well, which was ESSER 1, and so this year we received two additional funds for ESSER. And so I wanted to give you a brief update on how that money will be spent. The money is actually allocated over a 3-year span of time, and so sorry, I have something here. So it could be spent this school year, 2021, and then it could be spent next school year and the school year after that. The ESSER 2 funds primarily will be spent this year and next year, and then we'll have expended all of those funds that you see on the screen. So the way that we decided how to spend our funds was through a committee, which was comprised of administrators, teachers, student services staff, operations staff, which included facilities, and our business department as well. So we had a variety of people sit down and say, we have this money to spend, where do we think we should spend it? And the thing that we decided we really needed to do was hear from our community and hear from our teachers as well to get input from them. And so we did a survey for the families and the guardians. We had about 1,500 responses on that, which was great, from the parents and guardians. And then we also did a survey of the staff, which had about 145 responses, so that was more closer to about 20% of our staff. And we asked a variety of questions. Some were similar and some were different, but we were interested to see from our families, were they interested in after-school programming, were they interested in summer programming, would they attend if we provided transportation. The main thing that we really focused on in both of those two surveys was one question, which was, where do you think we should be expending the money? And we gave them choices, and the choices were academic supports, they were emotional well-being supports, and they were health and safety protocols. And so what we found was that people felt like we should prioritize on all of them. And they were our largest, that was our largest, all three. However, depending on the group that you talked about, the second for parents and guardians really was a split between social emotional supports and academic supports. And for our staff, it was primarily social emotional supports with academic supports coming next. So health and safety kind of fell to the bottom, but really overall it was prioritize all three. And so that's what we did. When you look at how we spent the funds, we really did prioritize all three of those buckets. With the ESSER II funds, we didn't receive a lot of money, although it was thankfully money that we received. It was about $170,000, which is significantly less than the other one, but this grant had a lot more stipulations on it. And so we really were told how to spend the ESSER II funds. And we had to spend money towards after-school programming, summer programming, learning loss. Specifically with learning loss, it had to be around social and emotional learning and professional development around social and emotional well-being, reading improvement, and then other learning loss. So you're going to see it's pretty targeted with this grant because of that. And so we decided to spend our after-school money on the extended kindergarten staff. We decided to, we had already, if you recall, last year, we said we were going to pay for summer for all of our summer programming this year. And so you see some of the salaries for SPIES was paid through this grant. Our ITOS was new this summer for our tutoring for middle school, if you recall. That we paid for through this grant as well. And then we, a team met and decided that they were going to spend money on a district-based wellness crisis response team, the supplies and the training that goes along with that. That'll start next year, and we're working on that. And then also the professional development, we decided to focus on wellness and trauma-informed practices. And so that's an ongoing process as well. And then the final thing was our reading support, and we put that money actually towards K+. And so where it says phonics supplemental materials, that went for K+ students. It paid for Handwriting Without Tears, and it paid for Wilson's Foundations, which is a systematic phonics program that we put in place. And so that's where that fund went. It went for the K+ program. So it was a tight amount of money that was really, really focused, but that was how the money was and will be spent for the ESSER II funds. The number on the bottom actually isn't right. It does match up top if you were to recalculate. Okay, so the larger amount of money that we received, though, was our ARP ESSER funds, the American Recovery Plan ESSER funds, and we received over $2 million for this fund, and we will be spending it this year and then the following 2 years. And so I did a breakdown so you could see in every year how we're spending those funds, and then I tried to match it up if it went across multiple years. And so a school counselor, the first thing that we decided we would be spending money on this year for the remainder of the school year was for a school counselor to help with our transition to Black Rock Middle School. And so that's where you see that fund right there. We also really felt strongly that with the transition to the new structure, K4, 5, 8, you've heard that we reduced some administrative staff. We've actually transitioned some guidance staff. And so we really wanted to continue to support our elementary schools. And so we decided to prioritize 2 elementary school counselors to transition us for next year as a great mental health support for our students at the elementary level. And then that'll transition out after next year. SPIES, you see for the next 2 years, what we decided to do with SPIES was to give support for SPIES but not pay the full tuition for SPIES this year. And so SPIES we're paying 50% of, $800 as a tuition. It's reduced to $400 for any student that wants to attend this school year. And then we'll look at next school year and see what that reduction looks like, but we did include it for the next 2 years, at least partially. Our summer programs, we paid last summer for it, and then you see money towards our summer programs for the next 2 summers as well. So we'll continue to support summer programs in addition to SPIES in our budget. We added academic support teachers at the middle school, and that is that whole concept of the MTSS model. We really wanted to make sure that we were providing that support at the middle level. We currently do that at the elementary level. You heard Dr. Gaudioso talk about that. And so we're looking at support teachers at all 3 middle schools, 1 teacher per middle school, to help us with IST and then also to help us with our Excel program. So they'll deliver instruction as well as help us with our transition to MTSS. That'll happen next year and the year after that. We also spent money and prioritized academic supports at the elementary level. This is partially because of MTSS, and it's partially because we looked at our data over the last couple years and recognized that we really do need to think about a phonics program at our earliest grades for our students. And so what we're looking at is a systematic phonics program delivered to all students in kindergarten, possibly all students in first grade, and then targeted students in second and third grade. In addition to that, there's money in there for a math program, a math intervention program as well for targeted students. And I don't have the programs listed because we really want to spend our time and make sure we're picking the correct programs. And so you'll hear about that in CCOB once we make the determination on which programs we're going to choose, how they were chosen, and what that money exactly will be spent on. But we've targeted that money for both math and reading support at the elementary level. And then finally, we did talk about health and safety, and we knew that that was one of the 3 buckets that people prioritize. And so this current school year, we're using funds to pay for our temporary custodial help that we had in the schools. And next year, we'll pay for our filters. Our MERV 13 filters will be in the budget for next year as well. And so I think we were really thoughtful about how the money is being spent and tried to make sure that we prioritize our students and instruction for our students and both mental health supports and both academic supports for our students. Any questions?
Thank you, Dr. McQueen. Mr. Moran?
Thank you, and definitely appreciate the thoughtfulness that's gone into the allocations. Just one quick question around the academic support. And that is, so I know with the counselors, those are really focused on the transition, and so those will phase out. But are there plans, and will there be built into the budget the targeted academic support to continue those programs, or are they looked at as temporary interventions?
So right now they're looked as temporary interventions. We want to look at our whole support program over the next 2 years and see, because we have Excel, we have reading, we have math support, and we'll be adding this layer in. So we'll reevaluate all of those supports to see what the best course of action is for us in a few years.
Any other questions? Ms. Kalish?
Not a question, but I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the amount of funds that are going towards both wellness stuff for our students and in training and trauma-informed practice for our educators, because I know that that's something that our community has really expressed a lot of interest in having, and I think it's really an important thing that we're providing both for our students and for our staff. And I know that having trauma-informed practice is going to be good for our kids that have all gone through our last 2 years of COVID craziness, and also in terms of our equity practices district-wide, that having trauma-informed practice is a real essential key to working towards that goal. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I appreciate all these programs. They look really fantastic. Thank you for your work.
Mr. Lee?
Thank you. I really appreciate the level of detail on your presentation. Just a quick question so I understand. The staff that are mentioned in these tables, how many of them are new district employees and how many of them will be contractors? Do you know what that's going to look like?
So all the positions will be funded through the grant, so they'll say grant-funded positions. So everything's a grant-funded position that's on this chart, except for our summer programs. Our summer programs are not grant-funded positions. The district funds a lot of the programs, and some of the programs we're just helping to supplement as well. But the counselor will be listed as a grant-funded position, and so will the academic support teachers.
So just to clarify, if it's grant-funded, all of them will have an end date on their contracts?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a little bit of a follow-up question to that, because I know that in terms of overall funding and looking at budgets, when you have one-time funding, it can be difficult to then spend that, to target that towards funding that towards expenses that are ongoing, right? You don't want to spend grant money that is very time limited on ongoing expenses, because then you're going to need to eventually find that. So I appreciate very much sort of the focus on making sure that these are specific to that timeframe. I did want to just clarify in terms of the SPIES and the other summer school programs. You're talking about that this year, that this will cover half the cost of that. But I just wanted to clarify that if a student is eligible but can't afford it, whether they're on free or reduced lunch or anything like that, they are covered also separately, right? Like they would be covered no matter what.
Right, that's separate from what we have in the budget for this, right? So
Right.
that is separate. We have funds put aside already for those students.
Right, so it's not as if, I just don't want people to think like, oh, well, if I can't afford that, I wouldn't be able to go.
No,
That-
right, yeah, absolutely, and it'll be in the flyer that goes out, right? So, yes, we absolutely have money put aside for students that have financial need.
Great, thank you very much. Ms. Shrek?
In the K-4 presentation, when the statement was made that current staffing levels would be maintained in order to implement the vision, is that inclusive of these grant positions or separate?
It's not, it's separate, so the two counselors are on top of the current positions that exist.
And the three, okay, and then the middle school teacher, and then, okay.
At the middle level, we have added staff to make the middle school program actually be able to come to fruition. So it is not
So this is over and
net
above.
of zero at the middle level. And I know that Dr. Gaudioso said that K4, because of moving from 2 to 3 schools, it's not, as you know, it's not an even distribution. So we work diligently, but we absolutely do have some additional positions at the middle level because of just the change in program and also moving from 2 to 3 schools. That's outside of this budget, though. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Shrek. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. McLean. Okay, so we are going to move on our agenda tonight. Tonight's actually the first time that we are going to add an additional agenda item. Just wanted to provide a little background. I think within the past year or so, there was a Pennsylvania state law that said if you wanted to add anything to your agenda, it needed to be voted on as part of that process. So what we're going to do now is take a vote on whether or not we're going to add this to our agenda, and then at a later point, after public comment, we will do the actual voting on that. So to try to make that clear. So at this time, the administration is recommending the addition of the following to tonight's agenda. The revision to the health and safety plan to make wearing of masks by students and employees on district-provided transportation optional, effective Friday, March 18th, 2022. Are there any questions from the board on adding an additional agenda item? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve? So moved. A second?
Second?
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay, so again, we will actually vote on that later. This was just a vote to add that to the agenda. Now, we're going to have audience recognition.
Well, I'm sorry, may I please ask a question?
Yes. I
abstain.
I just wanted to record, are you opposed or abstaining?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. At this, so we're going to move on to audience recognition. At this time, Ms. LaPera will open the chat feature, and you will see a 10-minute timer appear on your screen if you're watching at home. You can submit your comments and/or questions via the chat feature. Please be sure to begin with your full name and where you reside within the district in order for your comment to be shared. And again, that can just be general neighborhood. It doesn't need to be specific to street address. And then Ms. LaPera, do we have any in-person comments for tonight's meeting?
Yep, okay. I'm Jamie Bassman, Ardmore, and I am president of the Committee for Special Education. I wanted to specifically thank Kimberly Frazier for her presentation tonight on the State Department of Education Special Education Compliance Monitoring. I understand how confusing this can all be. It's like, wait a minute, we just had a thing. I echo Carrie Sautner's point specifically about professional development. One wonderful example, for those who might not have been aware, was that the CSE is part of our relationship with other CSEs in the area, coordinated with MCIU to have a Zoom training with Shelley Moore, an expert in universal design for learning recently, and that it was a perfect example of allowing professionals and parents to come together, focus on breaking down systemic barriers to community and belonging, and very much about the attitudinal barriers that impact on equity and inclusion. It's really important to us to be apprised in real time of what training staff are receiving, so that CSE can continue to partner and collaborate with the district. But I'm definitely glad to see that we are focusing on positive behavior support and trauma-informed training, which very much go hand in hand. I wanted to point out this evening, while we work on checking the boxes on compliance audits on equity and inclusion as we need to, we really need to focus and come together, everyone in this district, on the larger issue of community and belonging for our students. The mental health and wellness of students depends on feeling safe from the types of blatant discriminatory hate speech that has been pervasive, particularly in our middle schools. I applaud all the stakeholders that participated in the ad hoc meeting the other week, but this is an issue that requires the awareness and involvement of the entire school community, and particularly the students at large need to be heard. Both the students who feel comfortable speaking up about what happened to them and how they feel about the current system of reporting, as well as allies. We really need to hear from you as well. Also, CSE has had a seat at the table previously for the interviewing process for relevant administrative leadership positions. We've advocated for our seat at the table for interviews for the equity director candidates, and are disappointed by the lack of outreach to us in this process, as well as the need to coordinate with whoever it is that is on the DEI audit committee representing special education interests, which very much intertwine with both LGBTQ and racial equity issues. So again, we are asking to be represented as part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bassman.
Jill Altschuler.
Jill Altschuler, Marianne. I want to echo everything that Jamie said so well, especially the end part of her comments. Some parents have decided to get together and kind of discuss what we can do to partner with administration on trying to come up with ideas for safe spaces for students who feel that negative experiences that they've had are not being addressed adequately. So just wanted to let you know about that. And I wanted to comment on what I have emailed about in terms of the recording of the committee meetings. Still not really getting what I think is a satisfactory answer, especially considering that many of our neighboring districts record their committee meetings. Radnor, TE, Haverford Township School District, North Penn, and that's all I've looked into so far. So it just doesn't make sense to me. And as I said, it is definitely an equity issue, as there are various reasons why parents cannot attend in person and maybe even live stream, whether it's they're at work for the 8:30 a.m. Committee meetings, 8 o'clock even with their single parents who are putting kids to bed. I mean, there are parents with people with disabilities who can't even get out to come to these meetings. So it's just, I would really, appreciate a little more communication about that besides the emails, because then I feel like they just get dropped after a certain point. And how am I doing on time? Okay. And I had something else, but my phone's going to die. I have 1% left. So, but again, just in terms of, parents coming together to advocate, even when our kids are not the ones experiencing some trauma, and, the most recent of which has come to light, but as we've learned by talking to our friends whose kids have had these experiences and it impacts the family, we're really trying to, be their allies and speak up for them, because also, as I've mentioned in emails, many families I've learned have given up on trying to press for things that are really important for supporting their kids and making change, and they've just given up on speaking out. So, and a lot of you are new to these positions, and something, to keep in mind. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Altschuler.
Ruth Jenkins?
Ruth Jenkins, Wynwood. I need 6 minutes tonight. The first item on my long list is the equity meeting that we had last month with so many issues to be discussed. I was disappointed that we didn't have another equity meeting, that we need to have them more often. We can't have them every other month and let all of these issues fester without an opportunity for people to talk and to go into breakout rooms and to really, get down to the nitty-gritty of what's going on. My second issue is there summer school for the elementary students? There is. So one of the things I would like to propose, and as Shauna said, kindergarten. I've lived in this district for 40 years. I have advocated for 40 years for kindergarten, and if they wanted to do it, it would have been done by now. And it seems to be an issue that gets shoveled and put under the table and not really dealt with. I talked about an articulation agreement with the other nursery schools and full day care centers around the city. I have put into action the full day kindergarten for at-risk students that I had talked about years ago. That seems to be doing well. And when you talk about equity, this is definitely an equity issue. What I would like to see as far as summer school is concerned is the kindergarten students who are coming into kindergarten or who should be in kindergarten have a summer school program, a prep program for kindergarten. They know their numbers, they know their colors, they can write their name, all the things that make them kindergarten ready that many of the students are not prepared for. And once you are not prepared at the kindergarten level, it's really hard every summer, as you know. I know as a school teacher, I spent September catching up on everything that they forgot over the summer. And so when you're a kindergartner and you still are behind, you're always going to be behind. Every summer that you don't go to summer school, you're not going to catch up. The other thing that I wanted to mention was my neighborhood. Our neighborhood is inundated with students who are driving and speeding and dropping garbage. I could have brought a bag of garbage with me tonight. Now, the new garbage is masks. So now we have masks as well as McDonald's boxes and everything else all over our neighborhood. They are changing positions at the 2-hour mark. They're coming out of school, moving their cars. We have kids that are waiting at bus stops and driving.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Last week there was the basketball game. Thursday nights are absolutely insane.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jenkins.
We're going to be meeting with the Wynwood Civic and Ray Courtney, and I hope the board will also participate.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Dr. McGlynn, do you want to speak to the kindergarten and the summer school?
So the SPIES program actually targets incoming kindergarten as well. Our SPIES program It is for incoming kindergarten students through fifth grade students. And so we do have classrooms of students that participate that are targeted in kindergarten. And it's for academic and honestly, social emotional wellness as well. But we do have a program in place and that is targeted for incoming kindergarten students.
Great, thank you. So that is a summer school program through incoming the SPIES program is a summer school program that is incoming kindergartners through fifth grade. And there's also a variety of other summer school programs. And I just wanted to point out for the last 2 years, we've offered free summer school to any student in the district that wanted to take advantage of that. I know the first year, sort of 2020, there was a pretty high percent of kids and families that did participate in that. Unfortunately, I don't remember last year's participation, so I did want to follow up on that. And Dr. McGloin, could you also talk a little bit about the targeted kindergarten for at-risk kids? Or the
It's our K Plus program, right?
Right, but could you speak to both of them just for a moment?
Sure. So we did begin a K Plus program. I think that was what you were speaking about, right? Yeah. And yes, so we did begin a K Plus program this year in 3 of our schools. And we do feel like it's been successful. We're monitoring, as you know, through the year to look at academic achievement, but it is structured. That was partially what the grant paid for materials for that classroom. We're anticipating those same 3 classes being in place next school year. We're not looking to expand it this time, but that's not to say that we won't be doing that in the future. But yeah, Dr. Gaudios and I have both been in the classrooms, and it's just great to see small groups in those classrooms, about 10 students you would see in those rooms, in all 3 of the schools that we have it.
Ms. Garrison?
What percentage of our population is the at-risk student?
In our kindergarten classroom?
Just period.
Oh.
Just a general.
So I guess you'd have to define at-risk, because at-risk.
Well, you guys use the term, so I'm just using the term that was used.
So, I mean, I don't know, I can't give you a number at risk for the percentage of our population. I can get you one, though. We'll take a look and I'll get you one. Yep, absolutely.
Yes. And I was curious, is there any interest or ideas around having programming for parents for the pre-kindergarten, for children who might be 3 or 4 years old, to have programming for the parents to be able to help their children, with their phonics or whatever, so that they're prepared for kindergarten.
So at this time, we don't have anything in place, but that's not to say that, I love that idea. So it's not to say that we won't moving forward, but we don't currently have that in place, but it is absolutely a wonderful idea for us to put in place.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then I wanted to take
There's one more.
Okay, I just wanted to do a quick follow-up on the full-day kindergarten. So the district has engaged a demographic study to look at our enrollment and whether that is expected to grow. We've had a lot of enrollment growth over the last 10, 20 years. And one of the biggest barriers to full-day kindergarten in our school district has been space. And even just building a 3rd middle school was to alleviate overcrowding at our elementary schools. And so when we move to the 3 middle school model and we have fewer kids at our elementary school, and we have new information about ongoing enrollment growth, or whether it's going to grow or not, we can then look more closely at what our opportunities are within our school buildings. So I just wanted to be clear that even though we are moving 5th grade out of the elementary schools, does not necessarily mean that all of a sudden there will be empty classrooms. The reason we were building a 3rd middle school and moving to the K4 and 5-8 model is so that our elementary schools are not overcrowded, so that there's room in the cafeteria, so that there is an art on a cart, that there's rooms for music classes, and they're not, sort of in closets that were transformed, right? So we need to be very thoughtful and clear about when we look at, once we have a better understanding, a lot of things changed with COVID, and it's very likely and very possible that the enrollment projections will be different now than they were 4 or 5 years ago. But I just wanted to be clear that it is a space issue, and that opening up the third middle school does not necessarily mean that there will be tons of empty classrooms that could accommodate more kindergarten. Now, I say all that to provide context. And it is not a lack of interest and a lack of support at the board level for full-day kindergarten. I think that if you asked each person individually, you could have a very good conversation about the support around full-day kindergarten. So it is not a lack of support for full-day kindergarten. A lot of it is context and pure logistics and space. But I look forward as we move forward, and as I said, we engaged to get a new demographic study and a new enrollment study to see what opportunities that affords us.
Amanda Olson?
Hi, guys. Amanda Olson, Bala Kinwood. Thank you first for following the CDC guidelines and for swiftly removing the mask mandate, and your commitment to the consistency there was very much appreciated. Couple topics that I wanted to talk about. The 5 half-days at the end of the year, that is come to a shock to a lot of parents. Most parents I've talked to are very upset with the 5 half-days. And it's really not an acceptable level of education. As most parents know, a half day at school is pretty much not school. And with all of the school that our kids have missed, it's really not acceptable to take 5, well, it would be 4 days away because the last day was already a half day. So we're hoping that there could be some change in that, maybe either 3 full days and 2 half days or something else, because the 5 half days is really quite useless. Technology, if we could record the committee meetings, I was really disappointed that I couldn't watch the curriculum meeting for the 5 through 8. It was like 2 weeks ago, and it started at 8:30 in the morning, but I was getting my kids off to school, so I thought I could watch it later, but then I found out I couldn't, so I don't see why that can't be recorded. Okay, there are a couple COVID keepers around technology that I think should be re-examined, especially with regards to the curriculum stuff that was talked about today and currently. So my 4th grader has a Chromebook, and when my other son was in 4th grade, he did not have a Chromebook. So when he has what's called indoor recess, which, don't get me started on that, they play screens during indoor recess, and like, I just think that they should be playing with each other, or like playing a game or doing something with other kids and not staring at their screen. Kindergartners are given iPads, and the iPads are used as a reward system in the class. And so like if a student finishes their work, they get iPad time. So for kids that struggle to get their work done or don't get their work done as quickly as others, they don't get screen time. And then they get upset, and then they might act out. And then they get in trouble for acting out because they didn't get the proven addictive device that creates a dopamine drip in their brain as a reward system. And they're not getting that because they didn't finish their work fast enough. And it just, my kids did not have iPads in kindergarten, thank goodness. As parents, a lot of us delay giving our kids iPads. My kids didn't get an iPad till they were 9 and 10. So I would be really upset if my 5-year-old had an iPad in kindergarten. And I think that the district should really work with parents to limit screen time. In addition to that, my 6th grader convinced me that he should bring his phone to school because all of the kids have their phones at lunch. And it was like, I couldn't not, because it was like a COVID keeper. That wasn't like that before. They didn't bring their screens to school.
Thank you, Ms. Olson.
Thank you.
Ms. Buckman, can you read the comments from chat, please?
Sure. The first comment is from Marta Villaraga of Ardmore and on behalf of the Committee for Special Education. Given the importance of professional development for our staff, and as noted in the state compliance monitoring and the special education program evaluation, the CSC wants to advocate to be informed on topics identified and scheduled for professional development for staff. We would request to be part of the input process when identifying and planning future topics so that our voice as part of the LMSD community at large is taken into account to ensure that topics are impactful and meet the needs of our CSE community. We additionally request that the district administration share publicly the professional development topics scheduled so that our CSE community and the parent community at large can be made aware of the type of professional development that the staff has been exposed to and will participate in. The next comment is from Adrian Seltzer of Wynwood. Because the district has known for several years that the grade breakdown would be changing and fewer children would be in elementary schools, why wasn't full-day kindergarten figured into the final schedule update work? Now, if full-day K becomes a reality, scheduling has to start from scratch, further delaying its implementation. The next comment is from Joshua Brewer of Narberth. Thank you for moving to remove masks on transportation. The next comment is also from Adrian Seltzer of Wynwood. Have the numbers on discipline for children in special education changed? The last numbers showed that students of color in special education were 4 times more likely to face discipline than others. Has progress been made in this area? The next comment is from Kelly Senecola of Villanova. Thank you for your continued focus on making sure the students at Black Rock Middle School have an equitable experience pertaining to having field space for sports. Attention on the issue has been highlighted within parent groups, and I want you to know that there are many parents who support the field space at 1800 Montgomery Avenue. We will continue to advocate for the fields with the Board of Commissioners, who need to treat the Board of Education as a co-equal branch of government. The Board of Commissioners needs to stop saying no and be part of the solution, especially since the township has admitted to needing more field space in the community. Please stay focused and get these built for our kids. Trees can be replaced. The next comment is from Christina Chang of Penn Valley. This morning, the high school bus pulled up to my corner at 6:40 a.m. in the dark. Sleep experts have all stated this is not healthy for our teenagers. Would the school district administration consider an interim change to start times by shifting all start times 20 to 30 minutes forward? The field lights matter is gating any bigger changes, which may take years. If the district decides to swap elementary and high school start times, which became a very adversarial topic in 2019. I also echo Jill Altschuler's comments that 8:30 a.m. committee meetings should be recorded as a best practice and a matter of equity for all community members to listen to the dialogue and Q&A. Thank you. The next comment is from Janice Lipsitz of Marion Station. A large group of parents, 16, who are concerned, passionate, and invested in equitable school safety have come together to talk about ways that safe and brave spaces where student voices can be amplified. We would like to engage with you in this dialogue. We are excited that Dr. Mameen is here as a person with a track record of community engagement and who has expressed his partnership mindset welcoming of parent voices. We appreciate the follow-up email Dr. Mameen sent after many parents voiced their concerns during the Ad Hoc Committee on Equity and Anti-Racism meeting a couple of weeks ago. It's clear that Dr. Mameen listened closely during the meeting and acknowledges the need to develop clear strategies as described in his email, part of email copied below. We hope that there will be communication along the way to keep parents and guardians informed and hear an update on the equity director role. Thank you. The next comment is from Alexander O'Neill of Wynwood. I want to echo the request for more accessibility and recording of committee meetings for those who want to stay involved and informed, but may not be able to due to a variety of reasons, including scheduling, which is a particular issue for working parents and those who are getting their children to school. This is also an inclusion issue. Also, I am hopeful that the district will prioritize changing current practices so that our children feel safe speaking up, reporting issues that they face all too frequently. Thank you. Adrian Seltzer, Wynwood, another comment. If my comment does not take 3 minutes to read, why can't I make another comment? Also from Janet Lipsitz, these comments are especially urgent in light of the issue brought forward at the ad hoc town hall meeting, and we are all coming together as allies who have been impacted by inequitable practices. The final comment is from Sean McMurtry of Marion Station. what are the must-haves on-site at Black Rock for athletic fields, starting with the fall? Will BCMS and will Ballackinwood Middle School and Welsh Valley Middle School be bused out to Black Rock for football on the new field? What sports will Black Rock have enough students to form their own teams? And that's the conclusion of the public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Buckman. Okay, so we have two recommended actions tonight. Dr. Mamine, do you want to read the first one?
Thank you so much, President Klein. The administration recommends the Board of School Directors approve the revised 2021-22 school year calendar.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board? Ms. Kalish?
I just wanted to know when and sort of why this change was made. I understand that the administration has certain professional development that it's doing. It has been brought up that half-days are difficult. A full week of half-days is pretty complicated, especially for those families that have younger children in our district, and I just would like some background on how this change has come about.
Thank you so much. Dr. McGloin.
Sure. So when we were looking at programmatic change and the need to move so many staff members, we talked about having half days. What we needed to make sure that we could do, and why it took a little bit for us to get it on the agenda, was we wanted to make sure that we could transport our students. If you remember, we've had issues with transportation, so they needed to reroute all the bus routes. And once we knew that we could do that was when it was put on. But we recognized that because of programmatic changes and this year moves, we needed some additional time to make sure that that happened.
All right. I appreciate that going forward, and just if the district can, going forward, attempt to do full-day professional developments, because half-days, there are a lot of them in the elementary school. We have, every time there's conferences, it's 3 days of half-days, and it's not a small amount of disruption.
Are there any other questions? I do want to make one clarification in terms of the high school schedule, is that it's not actually a change at the high school schedule. And I understand that it is a big change for K through 8, but just to clarify, at the high school level, it's not a change. That last week has traditionally been finals week. And similar to what the high schools just had at the end of January in terms of midterms or sort of mid-year assessments, where it's a half day, this is a continuation of that. I know that it was not like that last year during COVID, but it's sort of a return to what had happened before. So I just wanted to clarify that the big change is the K through 8 and not 9 through 12. So do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye. Opposed.
Sorry. Any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay. Read the second one.
Yes, thank you. The administration recommends that the School Board of Directors authorizes the administration to revise the district's health and safety plan to make wearing masks by students and employees on district-provided transportation optional, effective Friday, March 18th, 2022.
Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Mooring? Oh, okay, Ms. Kalish?
I was just curious, I understand that the CDC is recommending this, but my my reluctance on it is twofold. One is that part of the reason that we're allowing for one of our mitigation efforts in the buildings is that we have this extra level of filtration and that we inherently cannot have that on buses. And I also don't see the disconnect between, like, what's different about a SEPTA bus that I get on that I have to wear my mask and a school bus that one of our kids can get on and they don't have to wear a mask. I don't know if I particularly have a question, but I'd just like to throw that out there for the consideration that perhaps this is not necessarily the same situation that we'd be considering, and I urge my colleagues to have caution as we make this decision.
Are there any other questions or? No, okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I oppose.
Opposed?
Thank you, motion passes. Okay, so upcoming meetings. On this Thursday, March 17th, is the Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting at 8:30 a.m. here in the District Administrative Boardroom. On next Monday evening, March 21st, is our regular business board meeting. It'll be here at 8 p.m. March 23rd, excuse me, is the next finance meeting. It is the operations budget review, 8:30 a.m. here in this meeting room. And then on March 30th is a combined communications committee and ad hoc for equity and anti-racism workshop meeting. They will be held via Zoom at 7 p.m. This is a follow-up to the last ad hoc meeting. It's a combination of communications and the ad hoc, and a follow-up to the last ad hoc meeting that was a town hall, and we postponed the regular agenda, which is the workshop, to work around the administrative regulation. And we thought it was a good collaboration between ad hoc and communications, since part of that is the process by which the processes will be communicated to the families. This coming Wednesday is the Ask the Superintendent meeting. We welcome you all to come here in this room at 9:30 a.m. for an in-person Ask That Superintendent sort of one-on-one time with Dr. Mameen. And upcoming also on Wednesday, March 16th at 7 p.m. via Zoom is the Parent Education Series, which is sponsored jointly by the School District Student Health Services Department and the Inter-School Council. And this particular Parent Education Series is on the whole athlete, a panel discussion with local sports and experts. And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.